Good evening. I don't usually introduce people from the lecture, so I'm not so sure how well I can do, but I'm very privileged to have this opportunity to introduce old friend of mine who's from the AA. And I just wonder what's the most efficient way of introducing. But by the way, also, maybe as same way as either Peter or me or managers here, it's about product of the educational school. And I think every time I see someone who carried the air of that time we studied, and I closely associate. And I think my knowledge, I think Rana is kind of sharing similar air we shared in the school. And attitude as well, her final graduate diploma project is about Beirut, where she comes from. And it's about city, about installation, it's about urban transformation. And I think from that graduate project, then she moved on, continue work with the city and grown together with city. I find it's really, really encouraging. And that spirit I really very much shared. I'm sure Peter would join that too. So I think the Rana had a few different ways of approaching the architecture. One is as an educator. Currently, she teaches in American University in Beirut, working with public art as a form, which are teaching urban context, encouraging students to actually facing certain conflict or certain condition of the city, particularly working with Syrian refugees and the social context, which is quite amazing developments through the past, how many years? Quite a long time.
Since 96?
Yeah, 96,
21 years.
Yeah. Other practice, she formed 200 grams. I was asking Rana about where does that come from, which is actually 200 grams. It's 1970s before urban conflict start, which are kind of a marketplace selling textile in the center of Beirut. So in order to exchange or promote, she started this design company, which is really to do with the appropriation of ready-made object by touch of some tactile or working with kind of craftsmanship. So in a way, that's kind of where the 200 grams come from. Yeah, they don't sell their work by grams, but I think this kind of spirits of that kind of a platform in which exchange some ideas through materials, which actually quite amazing collections of it too. So I think maybe Rana, after finished the school in 1996, she moved back to Beirut and taught in French Alba University. Yeah, and then move on to year 2000, start teaching American University. And from 2013, she decided to focus on teaching position, which are currently full-time assistant professor from 2013. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. And during all those periods, she did a worldwide installation, all those cities, as well as teaching position in different universities across Europe and New Zealand, and so forth. I just thought maybe this paragraph I find is quite nice. We grew up in a city that taught us to live a day at a time and appreciate its value. Our products are made in same manner to allow each person to bond with everyday peace and make part of his or her everyday life simply. So I think that's kind of attitude, I think, across her product, teaching method, and actually installation she collaborates with anyone to promote. So, yeah. So please welcome to Rana Haddad. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shin, for the great introduction. I'm going to try to introduce Beirut through the installation works that we've been doing in the city. So Beirut is a schizophrenic city filled with various narratives, incorporating a long history of conflict, destruction, construction, and reconstruction. The 15 years of civil war from 1975 until 1990 still holds repercussions that continuously manifest themselves in our everyday lives. The historical center, Beirut Central District, has been undergoing a facelift operation to efface all its past, removing all previous social existence on the scale of the BCD. So no signs of low-income users are allowed within the gated sterilized BCD limits, while beyond its boundaries, the streets are increasingly congested with beggars as a result of the ever-increasing numbers of Syrian refugees entering the country, whether by legal or illegal means. So here you have a view, a panoramic view on Beirut from one of the landfill. The landfill was about all the buildings that got destructed by Solidaire, and they covered part of our sea. The situation is complicated by the fact that less than ever does the mere reflection of reality reveals anything about reality. So this building is now to become the memory of Beirut, and they are still debating how this memory is going to look like. So they restored the building, but the building is still empty. So now we move to some of the installations. So the Théâtre de Beirut, Beirut Theater. It was a previous BMW repair pit in which it was transformed in the 1960s into the theater, and where the Arabic spoken theater plays started to take over the French repertoire. And it was the only experimental place where people were allowed to say anything about the social and political issues. So in 2001, we received a phone call from the people that were running the theater to tell us that actually they have to close the theater down, so there wouldn't be such a space anymore. And they were asking us if we would like to participate in the last festival that will take place there. So we visited the premise, and we found that there was a chair that was sitting there for 36 years and not attached to the other chairs. So we decided to abduct the chair and to use the window of that theater, because it's the only theater that has a window, which was very narrow. It was a 56 centimeter width window, and we came up with a structure of a machine that will cut the chair in two. So what was basically happening is that every day we will have, for 1 hour and a half, the engine running for the chair to be cut in two, and you will see slowly the action, the chair being cut slowly every day. And what was nice is that you will see the public standing before entering to see the festival, and we had such a big crowd because they would say to each other, "Come see what's happening in the window." So suddenly we had a much bigger crowd than the crowd that would usually come to the theater. And even the people that used to be intimidated by that place, that always lived in the quarter nearby, would come and look, and then we will encourage them to come in, and then they could see that the theater is actually as much for them as for anyone else. And the outcome was really very positive, in a way that we had a lot of narratives were circulating, and people were expressing themselves about the thoughts that they've seen in this machine and in this chair being cut in two. And we were able to have some money to do a small publication and a full coverage from the newspaper that allowed us to actually expand the life of that theater for an extra 18 months, which just due to this installation. And very ironically, we had a festival called Freike Festival that takes place in a village. They came to us and they say, we want the exact same installation for the opening of the festival there. And we were telling them, but it doesn't fit the context, but they really insisted, so we had to find a way to go around it. So the best way was for us to refer to Baudrillard concerning the way he was looking at things lately. And we chose to bring the whole machine, to have it in the space, and to have it with a sign that's saying out of order. And we fixed the rope so no one can plug it in. And our public was the piggy bank Mickey Mouse, looking and watching at this machine. And of course we were distributing the flyers to the people, like we distributed some flyers by the Théâtre de Beirut, telling the stories of the theater. The second project is the one of where we used the tray. So this is a picture that was taken for a project that was launched by Pro Helvetia, which is a Swiss foundation that wanted to do a book that is called Territoire Méditerranée. So it's about the Mediterranean territory. So we chose to make use of the book. So we said to them, the book will be our site. We need to know the content. And they were saying, but you wouldn't have enough time to come up with something. And we said, you have to trust us. Just send us the PDF. So they sent us the whole PDF. We had to read the whole book. And then we picked up on the main issue that they were tackling, which is territoriality within that area, the conflicted area. And we chose the tray because the tray in itself expresses the dialectics of power between the one offering and the one receiving. So here you will see the series of images that represent the relationship of false equality between two parties, the absurdity of the situation in which we find ourselves facing each other, the situation where we turn our back to each other instead of communicating, and where we pretend to be sharing hypocritically, and finally, total absence of effort to communicate. And we've put these pages in different chapters in relation to the title of the book. Then we've been invited with Pro Helvetia to do the touring to launch the book. So we went around with them to Algiers, to Bern, and to, I can't remember, one more place, sorry. And back to Beirut with it. Here it was in April 2001, specifically on the 18th of April 2001, where after several peaceful demonstrations led by Lebanese students objecting to Syrian military presence in Lebanon, protesters gathered at the National Museum. And because they refused to disperse when the Lebanese army officers were trying to tell them to disperse, forcible measures were undertaken by what was later revealed to be the Syrian Second Bureau. So by that time, a clash ensued and resulting in several injuries and imprisonment of several demonstrators. So we found ourselves with some of our students in prison. And that was really very annoying. So ironically, the same year, the French Cultural Center announced Beirut to be the cultural city of the Francophonie. So it was, and stressing on the idea of dialogue between cultures and acceptance. So in response to such a claim, we decided to come up with a set of installation that will express a repressed and strangled cry for freedom, and we chose to call it Cultural Dialogue in the Garden of Deafness. So the French embassy was very, very angry at the title, and they said, no, this is very pessimistic, and they chose to omit the last two words. So it became the Cultural Dialogue in the Garden. And of course, people could tell that it was in the Garden of Deafness, and we used the phonetics on purpose to critique and to mock the idea of communication. So the first, we did 8 different installations, but I will be showing 2 of these. The first one which is the emitting ear. We called it the emitting ear while it was doing the opposite. So we came up with a huge structure, as you can see. And I want to always, I need to stress that all the projects are done with very little means, so we couldn't really have a full shape of what is closest to an ear, so we had to do it in that way. So we took it and we had it, you'll see we had it installed facing the French embassy. Within the premise of the French embassy, there is a cafe, and we had this ear placed facing the cafe. And then we covered it with a thick sponge. If you will come and stand by the ear, you could actually eavesdrop on the 3 tables at least across the cafe. And so that was the time where the fear of being overhead was a common worry in our daily discourse, distressed by the possible presence of undercover agent of the Syrian secret police at any corner. So people were really watching every word they said. While here the purpose of our ear was clear, it flashed visibly from the entrance and made no effort to conceal its ability to eavesdrop, referring to the unavoidability of being overheard. And the second project that we were stressing on was the L'Orient Le Jour is the leading daily French newspaper in Lebanon. And in normal circumstances, L'Orient Le Jour has a 4,000 return journal a day. So we took these 4,000 and we weighed them. And people were, the owners of the newspaper and the French embassy was definitely sure that they will be selling more newspapers during the event of the Francophonie, and we wanted to test that. So we came up with a series of 15 CISOs that would be carrying a bag of sand that has the weight of the 4,000 newspaper and dated. So we started our experiment, and day by day it became apparent that less and less issues were being sold, as each sandbag was lifted higher on the scale than the day before. So, however, we were not able to complete the installation to the fullest of the 15 days because, distraught by the obvious result, the L'Orient Le Jour decided to stop delivering the 4,000 the unsold papers for vague reasons. So, which made the outcome of our work even more obvious. So, back to the Syrian invasion. Now we have a different kind of invasion, because in 2015, the UNHCR report that more than 45.1 million people were displaced worldwide, and the largest number since 1994. Beirut is at the heart of this global problem. Over 2 million Syrian refugees currently live within Lebanon's border. Lebanon has become the country with the highest refugee per capita ratio in the world. So in a reaction to that, we chose to do a set of installation, but that time that was really addressing a serious case where when all the architects were trying to give refuge to the Syrians and building shelters, we chose to try to empowering them by giving them a possibility to have a job, so to get some money. We have, in Beirut, we have a lot of people that go on collecting waste for recycling, but they don't have the right cards. So we challenge our students to find real clients in the city and to come up with a design of cards for them, for each one of them. So we did a lot of analysis, and they had to take into constraints the city's narrow streets, the various topography, and of course the mechanical restraints. So this is Mahmoud, one of our clients. He was really very excited that we will be building a card for him. So he even drew his small sketches, and that was one of the cards that, as you can see, can double its volume. And we went and we gave him the card. So this is BBC World coming and filming the event.
This is how I'm going to earn my bread. It's like I've gotten new arms and legs. I really want to thank them, and I know I can't repay them.
So what was nice is that with that card, Mahmoud was able to have 10 times more money per day, because he was able to collect more rubbish and to have it recycled quicker. So he was able to earn more money, and he's already a dad with 4 children. So he was really very grateful that he had that card. We got in contact with a lot of NGOs, and we're still hoping that we will be able to have a mass production and to have them circulate in the city. So the main question that we tackled during the studio is that where does design stop and reality take over, and how can we achieve this within a limited amount of time and money? The whole thing was done in 10 days, and the cart itself costed $250. And he still sends us a picture of the cart every year. So it's really nice of him that he does that. The SIFT is in May 2016. We've been invited to participate in New York Design Week, and the curators were asking us to reflect on the idea of transition and migration. And since we were going to the US, we thought that we really need to present the case of the refugee and what it means to have 2 million Syrians on a border. So we chose the SIFT, and we took a SIFT, and we've put in it 2 million pins. And what happened is that once you put the pins in it, part of the pins will hang down because they try to cross. And as you can see on the corner, it's very hard to go across. And the number that would be lucky enough to cross that border would be as little as this. So public space in Beirut is something that is very, very scarce. And despite the fact that we have a stretch, which is the Corniche, even the Corniche is being threatened. So the Corniche is a 3-kilometer strip along the seashore, a place where city dwellers come for a walk and to unwind, nearly the last public place in Beirut today. It's a place that keeps on avoiding to become part of the quarter nearby, where gentrification is taking over. A latent conflict of appropriation is slowly taking place, a fight with an uncertain outcome. So in 1999, Ashkal Alwan organization launched a call for ideas whereby the artists were invited to intervene on the Corniche in a temporal or permanent way. So the project generated an intense public debate on the meaning of public space in Beirut. And here for us, intervening on the Corniche and injecting cultural sign might jeopardize the equalitarian play that is taking place on site, therefore reinserting differences. And we didn't want that at all. So we start looking at what is common on the Corniche. And of course, it was the foot, and we took the foot as our common denominator to all passerby. And we started from there. So we had some wooden planks, and we start writing in Arabic on it with a yellow powder, so if there is any wind, it will just take it away. So, and we decided to call it My Foot in Art, because this is what basically was happening, and with all the declinations. So this one says rollers in art, and some others were like madness in art. So in Arabic it makes sense because it's a declination from the same word. And again, what was very nice is that I would go since 6 o'clock in the morning till 6 at night, just doing that, and having people coming around and watching and asking, especially these gentlemen here, was just standing by me and asking, "What are you doing?" What do you think I'm doing? And he said, "Is this art?" And I said, "What do you think?" And then he says, "Yes, it is." And I was like, "Okay, so it is art." So he said, "But then why are you insulting your work?" And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because you're calling it your foot in art. Isn't it an insult?" And I say, "Where are you standing now?" And then suddenly they realize that there's not much to art if they take it in a much lighter way. And they were able to actually interact afterwards with all the other installation that was set by Ashkal Alwan, even though our installation created a big debate and art galleries were not really supportive of the work. So this is how people were looking always at and we had all the children coming with their bikes, jumping on it, and then the skateboarders playing around it. And then we came back in 2012 to that same corniche, wondering how public is our public space. And we called it Public Beirut. So here we did 5 different installations along the seashore, along the corniche, questioning specifically that publicness. I will share with you 2 of them. The first one is called Corniche Extended. So this is where our students stumbled upon a pier that was funded by public money, but was surprisingly off limits to members of the public. So we started wondering and asking around, why is it the case? So we discovered that the pier was controlled by a single religious sect that monopolized the space. So the fishermen on site denied public access on ground that the pier was simply unsafe for the public to walk on. So we needed to really convince them that we need to do a project there. So their condition was that no one can step on the pier. And we said we will abide by that. So they were very happy. No one can step on the pier. So we decided to come with rails and with a hand car. And we installed a mini corniche as an extension on that pier. And so what happened is that now that the mini corniche was ready, people will, even though they will look at the restricted area sign, they will trespass that barbed wire, and we had 3 steps ready for them to go on the mini corniche. And while we take them up and down, we'll tell them the story. So we had all the papers signed so we can have the corniche for 3 weeks at least during summer break. But of course, after 1 week, we've been ordered to dismantle the corniche, our mini corniche. Again, it was covered by newspapers and it was covered by the TV. So this is one of the extracts covered by the TV. But unlike the chair installation in the theater, this one, I don't know if we can say if we failed or not failed, but what happened is that after such an installation, instead of letting people go on the pier, they actually built a wall where there used to be the barbed wire, and now people cannot access it at all. So, again, it says it all, which is a bit sad. So all this side is now a concrete wall. A different kind of chair. So this is the second one on the corniche. So we stumbled on a huge pit, and we wanted to do something in the pit. We were hoping that we would be able to do something for the children. But of course, the minute we approached the pit and we tried to look through, we had some security people coming telling us that no cameras are allowed and that this is a security zone. So we asked, where does the security zone end? So they gave us, first of all, the limits of the security zone, and then they told us that if you have to move 5 meters from that line. So we moved 5 meters from that line, and we found ourselves on an electric pole. So the electric pole became our site. So what can we do with an electric pole? So this is where the idea of air right came about, because debating the right in our city. So actually they were telling us that we cannot look through the fence, and the fence is of 1.5 meters high in height. So we chose to come up with a chair that actually, if with the sensor, if no one is on the chair, it will go 6 meters high on the pole. And if there is someone seated on the fence, on the chair will simply stop at the height of the fence. So people will come very excited, put the security, everything, and push the button to go out. And get disappointed. So some people were really very, very frustrated, and of course we were telling them the story, why we cannot take them higher, because the authority won't allow us to take them higher. So they would really try to look better, but they wouldn't see anything above the fence. But then there was a car always patrolling, making sure that we don't cheat. But what we did is that we timed for how long the car needs to come back. And some people were really very happy, even at 1.5 meter height. We chose to cheat. We chose to cheat and to go all the way up the 6 meter. And I can tell you, that view from up there is really breathtaking. So some were lucky enough to have the opportunity to go all the way. And again, for that installation, we had to have 18 signatures for 1 day only. They gave us the authority to have the chair mounted for only 1 day. And this is one of our engineer in the American University of Beirut, that when we went to consult him about the project, he told us that it needs 2 months to be built and at least $10,000. So we had it built in 7 days with $385. So when he came, we only gave him a ride of 1.5 meters. But he was very proud of us. And as you can see, October 7, 2012, the chair was still enjoying its air ride. So they didn't ask us to dismantle it, they just asked us to turn off the engine and to take the engine off. This is the absurdity of our city. So, a refuge for all out of mind. It's was the title of our contribution to a call for ideas that was launched in June 2005 by the Domus magazine. The issue was what could be done for the completion and functional redefinition of the building of the Ryungyong Hotel at Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea. So the hotel is a 330-meter high pyramid whose construction began in 1987, as was interrupted as a rough cast stage. So we chose to pick up on Samuel Beckett's poem, A Refuge for All Out of Mind, and on the historical fact that the famine that started in North Korea and that took the life of an estimated 2 million people. So our proposition was a 300-meter long copper gong suspended from the top of the elevator shaft all the way down the building, and the staircase was therefore going around it. The gong has one of its face covered with 2 million etches, while the other side was plain white, thus commemorating also the oblivion of this event. So when one hits the gong, all the people's soul would be stirred, and the gong hanging from the top down expressed the relationship between heaven and earth. Our entry to that competition got selected, and it was exhibited in New York, then in Milan. Now back to Beirut and Italy. A public space, a place of action, is again a curated work from Italian curators, where they asked some Lebanese and Italian artists to have two installations, one in a village called the Beshari in Beirut, in Lebanon, and another one, Rocca Gloriosa, in Italy. And their statement was about how, by means of public installation art, can aim to raise awareness among citizens, and especially young people in smaller places, towards the conservation, repossession, and the wise use of public spaces in favor of a sustainable cultural and economic development. So we will go to these places for only 1 week. So we had 2 days to choose what we want to do in the village, and 3 days to actually come up with the work. And here in Beshari, we chose to call the installation Between Heaven and Earth. So we discovered that there is this huge land of 6 acres that is really in the village, and that overlooks a sacred valley. And we aimed to actually fill that space so people can see it at a distance, and at the same time use the wind, because the wind over there is really amazing as a feel. So we chose to plant 363 sticks of 4 meters each, to which we've attached a small strip of white fabric. And we had all the children of the village coming and helping us out. And we were able to cover the whole surface in only 3 days. Well, we were working until 1 a.m. every night. But we were able to cover the whole site. And all the village around Beshari were able to see the installation, and people were curious to come over and to see it. And what was nice is that after that installation, the year after, the Boy Scouts decided to repeat the installation again, and the people of the village start making use of that place. So they're going for picnics, they're going even for weddings, and some activities with the Scouts are taking place now on this land. So somehow we can say that it was a success. While in Rocca Gloriosa, after 12 hours of traveling, we stumbled on the San Giovanni's procession. It was the same night of our arrival. So every household will put out their table with a tablecloth on it, to put on it the Virgin Mary statue with San Giovanni's to be blessed by the procession. So we really had in mind to collect objects from people, but we never thought that we would be ending up collecting tables with their tablecloths. So the first thing that we had to do is to go to the people and to ask them to give us their table, to trust us enough to give us the table, without us telling them what we intend to do with it. And the site that we chose is the castle, which is the castle that was built to define the limits of Rocca Gloriosa. And again, it was done with very little means, so we had to come up with a way of attaching them, and we had a very small ladder, so it was quite a dangerous way to go about it. And what was nice is that when people came to see what happened to their tables and saw the tower, first of all, they were surprised. Secondly, they were all arguing, why my table isn't it on top? You know, but again, it really created a debate, and it got people to come back to the castle, which was a place where no one would go anymore. And they came in a very friendly way, bringing food, and we had quite a banquet by the site. So this is the vertical procession. Mantes la Jolie par écrit, which is, again, we were invited by Chez moi, chez toi, which means my place, your place, another curated installation where we had to do, we were French and Lebanese artists. We had to do an installation in Beirut and another one in France. I will only share with you the one that we did in France. So here, when you arrive to the Val Fourret, you will definitely, the first thing you see is that the limit is very well defined, and it's where the Algerian settlement in France are. So these people are very frustrated, and they really are neither Algerian nor French, because the French are not allowing them to be French. So we after meeting with them and talking with them, we wrote a text. And as you can see on these papers, it's either we printed a full text or we printed some words where we left them where they are in the text on the paper on purpose. And we were able to have a 91 different declination that would address 91 different cases. We were able to stick on a 16.5-meter long table, 51 texts. And we had a banquet of words. And we invited the people from the settlement and from the French side to come to the banquet. And again, one of the encounters was that, so this is the table before the opening. This lady, this Algerian lady came and read one of the texts, and obviously it wasn't the right one, so she got really angry. She had a full pack of books in her hand that she threw on the floor, and she started yelling. She was like, "Who are you to write such text? Who do you think you are to tell me where I am?" Because we called it "Vous êtes ici," which means you are here. And we were saying, but it is not, please go around, perhaps this is not the right text for you. So she went around and then she found her text, and this is where she was, yes, this is more like it. So again, it was a way to generate a conversation, because some people were really, they didn't expect that someone would be so affected by what was written. And some conversation took place, and we could feel that people, when they talk, things work better instead of all the walls that they've been building between each other. Now it's last year, in actually 2016, I chose to do a project that investigates the noise pollution in Beirut. So here again, we did 5 different installations. I will be sharing 3 of them with you. So the first one, we called it Radio Silence, which was in Haush, Beirut. Haush, Beirut was a pine tree forest. So what was left of that forest in Beirut. And it was bombarded in 1982 and was totally burned. So the Haush was totally closed to the public until 2016, when they decided to open it, but with a fence separating the 2 sides of the Haush. And we discovered that that fence is of a sectarian segregation. And part of the playground was behind the fence, while from the other side, the children from the other side were deprived from the playground. So we chose to bring the seesaw, which is usually a common object that you will find in a public garden, and to have it on the gate by the lock. And by doing so, the children from both sides will start to call each other so they can actually play on the seesaw. And when the children, it's the best way, because children know nothing of segregation. And then it will get people to talk together. So this big fence suddenly could disappear due to that seesaw. And that seesaw was supposed to stay in the garden, but of course, after 2 weeks, we had a phone call again that says, you have to come and dismantle the seesaw. So unfortunately, we had to dismantle the seesaw. But what was nice is that we could see the children even jumping the fence. The limits were really became invisible. And here, on a lighter note, we were addressing the role of an urban tree. So what is the role of an urban tree in relation to silence and a buffer area? So the urban tree cannot fulfill its full potential, because when it is trimmed, it cannot work in a way that it's supposed to work. So here is a plaza near a center called Jeffinor that we have in the midst of a very crowded and very noisy area that is surrounded with a set of trees. But these trees, they get to be trimmed by the municipality. Even though we asked them not to trim them for our installation, they ignored our request and they chose to trim the tree. So we had in mind an installation per tree, but when we came and we saw that they trimmed the tree, we realized that it was only the in-between that did not endure such cuts. So we chose within 10 days to change the whole set and to have the installation in between the 2 trees, where people can go up and be immersed in the greens and have some silent time in the middle of the city. So this is where we're trying some models. The actual one-to-one. And we had a ramp that takes people all the way up to the tree, where they can sit and flip and be immersed with the paper, with the leaves. And what was nice is that on this plaza, every Wednesday there is a market, And people in the market would make use of that ramp. They will buy their food and go up, eat their food there, and come down again. A nest, somehow. Listen to observe is a more serious matter, let's say. It's about a noisy bridge that is very uncomfortable because that bridge crosses the highway without really giving the adequate access to the pedestrian to reach the bus stop that is fundamental for getting around the city. So our students were trying to see how they can help the community. So everyone started to complain and to say that they don't have the staircase to go down, and that this bridge is useless. At the same time, it's a very, very noisy bridge. So of course we couldn't really go by building a staircase for them, but the student chose to try to have a kind of an awareness for these people. So how by introducing 22 different boxes all over the bridge and on the benches around the bridge, where they can have their head in the box for 2 to 3 minutes, where the sound is nearly cut in half, so less noisy, and where they have a phrase that they can reflect on. So some of the phrases would read, "There is hope." Other phrases would read, "There is no escape." And some of them would read, "Your voice can be heard." And more of these, but at the same time, in some of the boxes, you will have a mirror that reflects the sky, others that reflects a specific point on the pavement where there was something to be read. And everyone was sure that no one will put his head in a box. And we were so surprised to see that nearly everyone on the bridge wanted to have his head in a box. So they all looked like ostriches for a while, hiding from the reality of the bridge and reflecting on it. What was nice is that we were sure that with the vandalism, the boxes will be totally destroyed, but it took them 2.5 months to disappear, which I think is great for a city like Beirut. So, for us, the war is not over. Because if I just read the phrase that is on the poster, a bird that has lost its feathers can no longer sail through the skies, and a person who has lost her memories can no longer find her way through the world she once called home. But still, I keep my face. And this is signed by an idiot spammer. And we thought that this really is how we feel about Beirut nowadays, because we are gasping constantly. We try and we gasp. So that was a project that we did with the Beirut Art Center, which is, so we refused to be in the center. We chose to be on a parking lot on purpose, because on that parking lot used to be a building from the 50s, a very nice modernist building that shouldn't have been put down, and which now is already a site for a skyscraper to be. And so we live in a country where we have over than 2 million Syrian refugees on our borders, while we are 4.5 million Lebanese only, where our streets are flooded by bags of garbage since August, where its history has been erased slowly but surely, and where the electricity is very seldom, and where our politicians inherit their position from a family member to another. So we're gasping, and by putting these two machines, which, I mean, the absurdity of the dimension of the machine in relation to the feather dusters, while they go up and they start vibrating, so you'll see now the movement. Very subtle movement. And what was nice is that this lady came across and she doesn't know that I was filming her, and she started interacting with the installation. So, and to sum it all, on the same wavelengths is, you know, in 1992, when Solidaire started to destroy all the buildings in the city and to change the look of Beirut, and erasing all the memories, we are finding that the Solidaire's effect is reaching out now to the other part of the city, which is the Delie, which is one of our last open access shared space in Beirut, the last free entry point to the sea along the city coast. So it is just after the Corniche that I showed you before. The Delie's unique landscape and ecological features are the most favorite hangout place for families and fishermen. And the fishermen settlement used to be where you see the destruction over there, because they are pushing them to leave the area by moving the acropods in. The Delie is threatened and is subject of dubious and corrupt privatization. Its future is uncertain. The image of renderings of luxury resort overlooking this sea are already in circulation. So we're trying with the Delie campaign and Save Beirut Heritage to try to put a stop to the project. And in May 2017, they invited people to participate in the event and to try to save it. So we tried to just say how we feel about being washed away and about, again, finding ourselves in this recurrent circle of destruction and privatization with a very simple gesture. And what was really very nice is that we really needed to say a word. People just understood it with all its absurdity. They just understood what we meant by it. And here I want to thank you by finishing with this amazing phrase that Peter Sabara shared with me. And I owe him so much, and I owe the AA so much. So thank you very much for having me and for listening to me.
Thank you for sharing 20 years of sort of partially erased projects, in a sense. I mean, every single one has been interrupted.
Yes, for a good reason.
I'll leave you to decide whether they're good or not. But there was an emerging sense that success was for you, and I think, I get a sense is when, regardless of the project itself and its particular formality, the shift is in the populace afterwards to change, to push into being public, together in spaces where they would otherwise be discouraged.
Yeah.
Would that be fair?
Yes, I mean, there are two things about it. The first thing is to engage the people so they would know about their rights and what is missing, and by just giving them such an awareness, they are reacting differently. And the minute the installation disappears, and this is where it's marvelous, the people keep it in mind much better than if it was around. And this is where I would like to cite Michel de Certeau when he says, whenever the maps disappears, the discourse cuts through. So it is the bridging. And this is where every installation is about having to create and to have a conversation with the people and to make sure that the narrative stays, and even if if the installation is temporary, the effect of it stays with the people. So for how long? Who knows? But we're trying.
Am I allowed a residual question? Oh, go on. Language seems quite key in the formation of a project, and obviously, and I'm sort of juggling in my head in that the language is seen in the various pieces. Are either Arabic or French or English.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find a particular language is more important for a particular site and a particular project, or a pairing of languages? Is that part of the site, as it were?
Yes, of course. Whenever we go public and we are on site, we have to have Arabic. We have it as because not everyone nowadays in Lebanon can speak another language. Before it was nearly everyone that could speak, for sure French, because we came from a French mandate, and English, because the trend after the war turns into the more international language, which is English. But Arabic is always on all projects. Then the choice of French or English as a second language is very much related to site. So when we were in the Théâtre de Beirut and we were collecting all the stories from the area, a lot of them came in French because it was very heavily loaded with French repertoire. And when we did our publication, everything what came to us in French stayed in French, and everything that was given to us in Arabic stayed in Arabic on purpose to reflect what what we are about, because this is our culture, whether we like that or we don't. And so yes, it is related. It is site related in a way. Yeah.
In the introduction, Shin mentioned that the ingredients for your diploma project are still very much the ones that you're working with today in terms of the context you're working within, but also the tools you're using, but also the conversations you're trying to have about the city. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit about your project and kind of how that set you up for kind of the 20 years that have followed.
You mean at the AA?
Yeah, your AA project.
I can, very briefly. Tim remembers that, I think. You do. So I did my diploma with Raoul, and I got to a point where I needed to act, because it was about Beirut and it was about the city. So this is where it was very important to explain to any tutor at the AA why it was important to go all the way when we were start seeing the cities being erased and not taking into consideration the memories and how important this is for a continuation in the city. So I've been asked to actually go see all the tutors, and I've seen 12 tutors for 6 weeks. And every tutor would see that there's a lot of potential in the work, but that they could not help me. So I turned to Tim. And Tim was very supportive, and he encouraged me to go independent. And I went independent, but to make sure that my jury would be okay, I did my first installation in the basement, where I had all my drawings on the floor and asked all the tutors to step on it. And by the end of the room, I sat on a table and I had 2 books. And I did what I just did for you today. I was reading the story of Beirut through a model of a book that would transform into 3-dimensional shapes, and how this started in my room and finished in the city with all the memory of the city. And yeah, so this is how installation started. The need of finding a way to share, for everyone to be able to follow and to grasp the intensity of a city was the only way for me to do that.
I'm really glad I asked this question, because I think that's actually really fascinating. Also in how your final project as a student can set you up for a kind of very different type of career in architecture that's kind of creating these platforms for conversation through objects and installations within the city. And I quite like the fact that it couldn't be tutored by any one person or situated within any one unit. It was kind of an independent project.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't given a lot of choices, because I've seen all the tutors and no one could really help. So I had to write a letter asking to go independent. It cost me an honor title, because they told me that I cannot be on an honor list if I am independent. But it's okay.
Shouldn't that be the only criteria?
Like, even if I deserve it, I won't have it.
Well, that's such a nice thing to see everything you've done since then. Such a continuity, as Peter said, of a battle, my goodness. I mean, I kind of think, do you ever feel like going somewhere else? Or, I mean, you're in the front line and seem to have been in the front line ever since you returned. Do you feel more optimistic, more pessimistic?
Now?
Yeah, now.
With everything that's happening now?
Yeah, well, I know.
You know? I'm here.
You're here. I know. It's
I'm gasping.
Really.
I'm gasping and
yeah,
letting
you're
go.
gasping. Yeah.
It's getting harder, to tell you the truth, Tim. It's getting much harder. I think I'm optimistic by nature, so I always want to see the bright side of things. But lately, it's becoming very, very hard to find that side. Well, this year in 2018, again, I'm set for a new set of installations, and I really have to be careful this year. So I don't know what the city is hiding for us.
Are you getting full support from the university?
It depends. In some places, no. In some places, yes. And because we are in a university framework, I have to be very careful and make sure that we have all the papers needed. So sometimes we have to apply for 18 different signatures. Sometimes we have to the last minute, we don't know if we will be able to install and have the work done or not. This is why a lot of the work you could see are done in between 24 to 72 hours, where we have overnights. Because we don't have a paper, and we wouldn't dare to go on the street if we don't have that paper. And despite that, we had some quite, we were in such serious situation where I was going to go to jail and where some of my students was going to go to jail. And we really had to get a lawyer and make sure that this won't happen.
When you say we, is it you and the student
so it's
body,
me
or
and the students' body, me and my colleagues. Sometimes I do some installation with Pascal Hachem, that probably you read his name on some of the posters, or sometimes I did an installation with Pierre Hajboutros. So these are some of my colleagues that wanted to be part of the work, so yes. It's always a we, because I can never do it alone anyway.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering
I'll always get some help.
if the we had momentum in
It depends.
in a sense.
Different we's.
Different we, yeah. Well, extraordinary. As I say, extraordinary battle that you're fighting. I remember you asked me. You asked me to come to talk in Beirut, and it was just at the point where I think there was a little bit of trouble. Well, there's always a little bit of trouble, but there was a little bit of a flare-up between there and Israel, and I felt quite cowardly saying no, but I said no because I was sort of thinking, do I want to go into a situation with that level of tension? And I've thought about it since, in terms of you going back there. I always thought it was a courageous thing to, you were dead. You were absolutely clear that was your mission.
Yeah.
In life.
Well,
and,
I still believe that Beirut made me. If it wasn't for I grew up during the war, so the effect of the war got me to do that. It's a reaction. It's a kind of a resistance.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I remember it when you were doing the project. This extraordinary sense of, as you've talked about tonight, it's history being this wonderful history. You always describe the soul of this history and what it meant. And I always wanted to come and see that, but
you're always welcome.
But I'm braver now. I'll come.
Now I will tell you, wait a bit, but then you can.
I can't. No.
I wouldn't dare to say to anyone to come now, but.
Yeah, it's a moment. Is that the Saudi moment, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.
Yeah. Probably not.
Really amazing work. I'm also a Lebanese student at the AA, and I did the visiting school with Shin this summer. And I wanted to ask you, there's this idea of the erasure of memory in the history that you're somehow trying to always represent or provoke, or do you think in terms of I don't know, the national problem of writing it down, or people to actually, do you think your installation can also have a larger message of how to engrave or reproduce memory or erased memory?
It's always ongoing, so I never really had the time to stop and reflect on it. But probably if I am, it might be the case. But again, as I was saying, we are a production of our city, and our city is somehow too quick and too intense. So whenever we move forward, I've put this project behind me. So if one day I'll get the opportunity for a publication, then perhaps this put together might be what you're suggesting. But for the time being, I'm again seeing it as punctual things that is erased, yet waiting for another thing to come, and they are always in the here and now, in what's really happening in the moment of their happening. Thank you for the suggestion. Yes?
Hello, I'm Rosa, and I am currently working with my friend here, Sureya. We are working on a duo exhibition for next March. And while I was talking with her about Beirut, because she's doing a project about Beirut, she was keep on mentioning about the boundaries in Beirut, how it contains the socio-political narrative, especially suppressed or limited in a historical way. And even though I'd never been there, I could really immerse, because it is the same thing happening in my city, my country, and I believe it's the same for all nations. And regarding that, I wanted to ask you what, because you have mentioned that your main site of your work is Beirut, I wanted to ask what boundary means for you in Beirut. It might be a broad question, but it will be interesting to hear what kind of aspect you want to concentrate or have concentrated of boundaries in Beirut.
Actually, every project is addressing a kind of a boundary or a kind of a threshold, but I personally don't see any boundary. I refuse to see boundaries, because I still believe that we live very well without it. It's something that's been inflicted on us. But if you look at people, if you see how they react, it tells you that they are not about boundaries, that boundaries is something that is imposed on them. So my opinion is that there are no boundaries. We just have to always work to erase whatever boundaries that get to be imposed on us. And I think that goes for every city. This is where we need to do the work and not wait for anyone to do that for us. It's our right as citizens of the world.
You are welcome for any help for your next installation.
Sorry?
You will take any student from the AA if you want to help the project.
Everyone, you're all welcome. Peter, you're the first, I love it.
So I think that even to me, it's really, I thought I know how to work, but it's actually put into this context is quite inspiring, or maybe encouraging, I must say. Just one thing I thought, when you said titles don't take it seriously, then I'm just thinking, because Rana telling me that, well, it's actually, she was given officially the title activist given by city of Beirut. So then I just thought maybe activist is the provocation, but at the same time, having sense of humor, it's very, very important. Then my tutor at the AA used to tell me that, well, one thing you cannot teach is a sense of humor and irony. Then I think you are a very brilliant teacher, I think.
Thank you.
And also, I think we should take it very seriously about attitude and work and what kind of city aspect she reflects through series of work. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.